Hello, my name is Carrie. Welcome to my tiny little kitchen. I have been cooking since I was a child. I'm getting ready to make German chocolate cake. German chocolate cake doesn't really come from Germany. It is a cake that originated in America, and it comes from a brand of chocolate that was developed by a man whose last name was German. So it's actually German's chocolate cake. We're using one entire box of chocolate today, which is this many bars. And we're going to break those bars up into a bowl. This is sweetened chocolate with 48% cacao, so it's not real dark. And we're going to boil some water to add to that in a little bit. In our main bowl, we're going to cream the butter and sugar. This takes 2 sticks of butter. And before we do anything else, we should turn the oven on. We want to preheat it to 350 degrees. My husband and I live at the beach in Southern California, and even though today is a summer day, it is cool and breezy, and there was a little bit of rain this morning. And it's cloudy out, but very comfortable, very nice. It's a perfect day for baking. I have 2 cups of white granulated sugar. Today I'm using Eagle brand that I'm adding to the butter. And I have my electric hand mixer. I want to cream the butter and the sugar together until they are fluffy and fully mixed. And that'll take about 2 to 3 minutes. I had a KitchenAid mixer, and those work really nice, especially if you do a lot of baking, but they take up so much room in a kitchen, and the hand mixer is actually more convenient for me in a small space. So we'll start mixing. Okay, our water's hot. We need a half a cup of boiling water. I have an electric tea kettle that I boil the water in. And we're pouring a half a cup into the measuring cup. And we're going to add that to the broken up chocolate. We want the chocolate to melt. So we'll stir that up a little bit and let the chocolate melt. And then that can cool while we're working on the rest of our cake batter. You can see how the chocolate's starting to melt into the water. Smells good. Smells like hot chocolate. It's almost completely melted. So all of the chocolate is now liquid. We'll set that aside. I'm using parchment paper. I want to make a square cake, so I'm using square cake pans. And I've cut a square of parchment paper to fit in the bottom of each pan, and that will keep the cake from sticking when it's time to remove it from the pan. Also, we need to use a little bit of butter. We want to butter the paper and the sides of the pan because we don't want our cake sticky. So I have butter there, and I'll do this one. Whenever I unwrap a stick of butter, I take the wrapper and I fold it up and I put it into a container in the freezer compartment of my refrigerator. And then when I need to butter a dish or a cookie sheet, I pull out one of my butter wrappers from the freezer and use that. I also have a little bit of flour here. I want to sprinkle that in the pan. And then I'm just going to tap the pan to lightly coat the sides with the flour. And that will further help the cake not to stick to the pan when I need to remove it. So this is nicely floured and buttered. There's also a cooking spray called Baker's Secret that does butter and flour that you can just spray into the pan. We don't have that today, so we're not using that. The next thing is we have 4 eggs and we need to separate them. Separating the eggs means you're putting the yolk separate from the white. Very important, we're going to be beating our egg whites. If you want your egg whites to beat correctly, you want to make sure that there's no yolk in the egg whites. There is a kitchen gadget that you can plop the whole egg into that automatically separates the egg for you, but most people just do it by hand. I have loved cooking ever since I was a young child, and really being able to follow instructions and loving what you're doing is what you need to guarantee success. And anybody who is happy in their kitchen could be doing the same thing that I'm doing today. Okay, we have our eggs separated. I've rinsed off and dried the beaters because we want them clean before we beat the egg whites. We're going to beat these egg whites on high. So we're supposed to beat the egg whites until they're stiff. I've been beating them for a few seconds now, and they're kind of frothy. When they're stiff, they'll be bright white, and they'll stand up in little peaks when I lift the beaters out of the bowl. So I'm going to continue beating them, and I'll show you them again when they are in soft white. Okay, our egg whites are stiffly beaten and prepared for when we need them. Next, we're going to add our egg yolks a little bit at a time to our butter and sugar mixture. So we have our chocolate and vanilla mixed in with the eggs and sugar and butter. And now it's time to sift our dry ingredients. We're using a special cake flour. It's a little bit different than all-purpose flour, a little bit finer, especially for making cakes. And we're going to be using buttermilk today. Buttermilk, it makes cakes extra creamy and moist, and will give a nice flavor to our cake. So we have 2½ cups of cake flour that we're going to add to our sifter. And the sifter just mixes the dry ingredients a little finer and gives them even distribution throughout your batter. We don't want any hard lumps. We're using 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Salt is optional, but a little bit does help the flavor in your foods. And we're using a teaspoon of baking soda. Typically, recipes that call for buttermilk also call for baking soda. We have 1 cup of buttermilk already pre-measured. And we're supposed to sift our dry ingredients, mixing them alternately with the buttermilk. So I only put a part of the sifted ingredients into the cake batter bowl. We're going to do a portion of sifted ingredients and a portion of buttermilk. And we're going to mix after each addition until all of the ingredients are added and mixed in. All of our dry ingredients and buttermilk are mixed into the batter. It has a nice milk chocolate look. We still have our stiffly beaten egg whites. And now it's time to gently fold the whites into our batter. When a recipe says to fold in the whites, usually you want to use a rubber spatula and just gently stir the whites in until they are mixed into your batter. So that's what we're going to do now, is just gently mix in these egg whites. Once the egg whites are mixed in, we will pour our batter into our cake pans. Now you can use a round or a square pan. And for this recipe, you want your cake pan to be a 8-inch or 9-inch, no larger than 9-inch. And I'm using 8-inch square pans. Now I only have 2 pans, and my oven is small, so I can only cook one layer at a time. So I'm going to do my best to put even amounts of dough into each pan. And this is a 3-layer cake, not a 2-layer cake. So I'm going to need to save some batter for the 3rd layer. So let's see. It takes about 35 to 40 minutes for each layer to cook. We'll want to check it at the 35-minute mark to see how far it is and to make sure we don't overcook it. Again, I want to be gentle with my batter. I'm going to take a look from the side and see if that looks about even. It does, and it looks like there's a even amount left in my bowl for the 3rd layer. So I'm going to put 1 layer in our preheated oven, 350 degrees. My oven has a light that I can turn on and a glass window in the front so I can watch it as it's baking. And we'll set the timer for 35 minutes. I'll come back and check that when it's finished baking. So while our layers of cake are baking, we're going to make the pecan coconut topping that goes on our cake layers. So we're going to take 1.5 sticks of butter, and I'm using 1.5 cups of cream. If you prefer, you can use canned evaporated milk instead of the cream, but I'm going to add the 1.5 cups cream. I'm going to put this on a medium heat. Get all of our cream in there. We're going to use 4 egg yolks. So I'm going to save the whites to make something else later on. Either coconut macaroons or baked meringues that I can bring to a party next weekend. But for this filling, we only need the egg yolk. So we're using 4 egg yolks. Stir this up a bit. I have 1.5 cups of sugar. While the butter's melting, I'm just trying to mix things in. I don't want those egg yolks to cook without being mixed. Now I'm adding a teaspoon of vanilla. I'm also stirring in 1 tablespoon of flour. And that will help the mixture thicken as it cooks. I'm going to get that mixed in real well. I'm also going to add 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. Still mixing in the flour and waiting for the butter to completely melt. I've been cooking and stirring our egg and cream and butter mixture for about 12 minutes now, and it's getting nice and thick. It's been bubbly, and I've made sure to keep it stirred so that it wouldn't burn on the bottom of the pot. I have a clean bowl, and I'm going to take my pecans and my coconut, and I'm going to mix those together in my bowl. And my mixture that I'm cooking is ready. So I'm going to just pour that over my coconut and pecans. I'm using a silicone spatula, not a plastic or rubber one, because sometimes in really hot liquid, a plastic or rubber one might melt a bit, but the silicone ones can handle the temperature. So I'm going to mix all of that really well now. And we'll let that cool down. 1 cake layer is already out of the oven and out of the pan and cooling. I want to let them cool for 20 to 30 minutes in the pan, and then use a knife around the sides. And now we're going to invert this one. And it comes right out of the pan. And we peel the paper off and let that finish cooling so it's completely cool before we put our filling on. Well, our filling, our topping has had time to cool a bit in the refrigerator, and our first 2 layers are completely cooled. So I'm transferring one to the cake plate, and it it's time to invert the second one. We'll take the paper off of that and let it complete cooling. And now we'll take about 1/3 of our topping, which is about 2 cups. And we'll just spread that evenly on a layer of cake. Now when I put this cake onto the plate, what was the top of the cake when it was baking is now on the bottom, touching the plate, and then the bottom side now becomes the top of my cake. Tiny bit more. I want to make sure that we have enough between all of the layers. For people who like coconut and people who like pecans, this is very much a favorite cake. The first time that I made this cake was in 1977, and I was 17 years old. I was living in Southern California, and on weekends and on the holidays, my family would go to a cabin that they owned in a place called Big Bear Lake. And there was a restaurant at Big Bear Lake called the Black Forest Cafe. And the Black Forest Cafe was run by a German couple named Carl and Irma. And I would work some weekends and holidays for them in their cafe. And when I was 17 years old, I bought a box of German's chocolate. And I thought that I would surprise them when I came to work at their restaurant and bring them a German chocolate cake. And I was so proud when I arrived at their restaurant with my homemade cake. I thought that they would love to serve it in their restaurant and that they would be very pleased. And I was very surprised, and so were they, because they said that this was not a German cake. They didn't have anything at all like it in Germany. And while they did enjoy the cake and eat it, they did not serve it in their German restaurant. I'm going to wait a couple of minutes longer to put the 3rd layer on because I want it to cool a tiny bit more. We're ready to put the top layer on the cake. My father-in-law is going to be very surprised and pleased when he sees his birthday cake tomorrow. My mother-in-law does not bake, and she doesn't enjoy cooking. She's an artist, and she enjoys painting and teaching other people how to paint, and her home is quite beautiful. It's like an art gallery. We'll be going there tomorrow, and you'll get to see their reaction to all of the treats that I bring. They're very cute. When we come in with a bag of goodies each time we visit, they start eating them right away and hiding them from each other. It's very funny. So now we have our top layer on, and our final layer of topping. And because this is a birthday cake, I happen to have a few maraschino cherries in my refrigerator. So I drained them from the liquid and cut them in half. And I'm just going to decorate the top of the cake with the cherries in a random pattern. And that will make it have a little pop of color and be a little bit more festive for my father-in-law's birthday. The sides of a German chocolate cake typically are not frosted, but sometimes people will use a chocolate frosting on the sides. I think that that's just a little bit too sweet, so I prefer to have the cake just the way it is. I'm going to place it in the refrigerator, and I think because of the topping that it should be refrigerated until you're ready to serve the cake. And here is our American German chocolate cake. Thank you for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed making this cake with me. Hello! I finished the German chocolate cake, and this is a traditional German chocolate cake where the sides are not frosted. There's just the coconut pecan frosting on top. But when my husband saw the cake, he was disappointed that there was no chocolate icing on the sides. And since I have the ingredients and the time, I'm going to go ahead and make homemade chocolate icing. So, the chocolate frosting calls for 1 stick of melted butter. I melted this butter in a glass dish in the microwave for 30 seconds, checked it after 30 seconds, and microwaved it for another 30 seconds until it was completely melted. So you want to do that at 30-second intervals so that you don't burn your butter. And this glass measuring cup is perfect for using in the microwave. For safety and health reasons, please do not use plastic in your microwave oven, and especially do not microwave things with a high fat content in your microwave. So we have our melted butter, and we're going to stir in 2/3 of a cup of cocoa. Sometimes I use special dark cocoa, but today, to go with the German chocolate cake, we're just using regular cocoa. So we'll add that in, and we'll use the hand mixer. So our chocolate is mixed in. Now we have 3 cups of powdered sugar, also called confectioner's sugar, and we're going to add that alternately to the chocolate mixture with milk. Now you could use regular milk, half and half, or evaporated milk. Today I'm using evaporated milk. It gives it a rich and creamier flavor and texture without all of the fat of cream. So we'll add part of the sugar, and that's 1/3 of a cup of milk. Mix that in. electric hand mixer to mix the chocolate frosting, alternating the powdered sugar with the evaporated milk. And now that that's all mixed, I'm going to stir in a teaspoon of vanilla extract. You can find the recipe for making homemade vanilla extract on my recipe blog. So we're going to mix this in. Now it's a little bit thick, so if it's a tiny bit thick, you can add extra milk. So I'm going to add 1 more tablespoon of evaporated milk, just so that it's a little bit easier to frost. So it's nice and creamy. And we can use this just to make our cake a little bit fancier by applying the chocolate frosting to the sides. So I'll carefully smooth this on until all of the sides are covered. We'll come back and take a look at it in a minute. I finished frosting the sides, and now I'm going to take the little tiny bit of leftover frosting. I have a pastry bag and a pastry tip. Now I should mention, even though I've had a catering business and a gourmet chocolates business, I still consider myself to be an amateur chef. I've never had any formal education. I'm all self-taught, and I'm taking the last little bit of this frosting. See this? My husband's standing nearby because he's waiting to eat this, to lick the spatula, so I'm going to hand it to him.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So now we're going to take the tiny bit that was left and just decorate the top edge. And while a traditional German chocolate cake does not have chocolate frosting on the sides, you can see how adding the chocolate frosting is making the cake just a little bit more special for my father-in-law's birthday. A little bit more fancy. It also adds some sweetness, and my father-in-law has quite a sweet tooth, so he will appreciate the extra sweetness that's on this cake. Now, again, I haven't had a cake decorating class. I'm not a professional at this, but you can have these simple tools that you can buy at many stores or even order online. They aren't expensive, pastry bags and pastry frosting tips. But the end result is so nice and very much worth the effort. So now we have our finished German chocolate cake with coconut pecan frosting on top and in between the layers, and a simple chocolate frosting on the sides and decorating the edge. Thank you for watching.